Hi, ladies. Welcome back to another week of Studio Today. We've got some great conversation today talking about organizational culture that we read about in Chapter 8. So the first question here to start it off is, what does organizational culture mean to you? Any takers on that one?
I feel bad because I feel like I always start. So
I started off here.
Okay.
Organizational culture to me basically means more of a balance than anything. You have a group of people coming together to try and accomplish certain goals, and I think for me it's just a balance of all those individuals coming together.
I agree. A balance is a nice word to use. I couldn't really think of using a term outside of culture within the definition of what organizational culture is, because truly, to me, I see it as, what makes up the inner workings of the individuals within the organization, but also the relationship that individuals in the organization have with their customer base or their client base.
yeah, I think that's a really good point. Like, I think it's interesting that they talk about how organizations are a product of communication, and then you relate that into culture, and then when you put it together and you create organizational culture, and you think about how culture's formed, it's almost like it's a smaller subset of a greater culture, and it can be so much more diverse than even just a simple, like what we think of as basic culture, because it's a whole bunch of people coming together from various aspects of backgrounds and different places and things like that.
Absolutely. Which brings us to the next question. And just, I don't know if you've changed jobs, but I know you work for Starbucks, which I think is a very good example of what culture is. So maybe if you want to share some of your experience on that. And Liz, I'm sorry, I don't know where it is that you work.
Absolutely. Yeah. Starbucks is definitely big on culture. It's something that it's pretty much put to you from day one of the hiring process. We come in with new baristas, and currently I'm a trainer. I was a store manager for about 6 years, but as a trainer for the last 3 years, like, your focus is teaching them values and what the company stands for. And I think that that's like the backbone of company culture is, okay, what's the agreed upon set of parameters that we always go to? Like, how do we always treat people? What are we always going to fall back on when things are tough or when situations can get a little hard to handle? So at Starbucks, a lot of that has to do with treating each other with respect and dignity is one of our big, like, pillars of culture. And it's also always making it right for the customer. Those are the two things that you'll hear, like, tossed around on a frequent basis. Pretty much, actually, I'd say on a daily conversational basis when you're doing training or anything like that, or having a coaching conversation with someone. So those are definitely big parts of our culture. And then, doing things, making it right for the environment. That's a big part of what Starbucks is doing right now too. So there's a lot of good stuff there to fall back on as part of our culture.
Yeah, so I work for a large healthcare corporation. They're actually based out on the East Coast. And I think our values or our culture revolve around the same thing. We have respect and values. The diversity is a big piece, and community is another big piece that the company focuses on. I think interestingly enough, we have actually gone through a merger. So I've actually experienced, a little bit of, like, you have some positive culture and then some negative culture and just differences in the culture altogether, because like I said, we're based out on the East Coast, but I live on the West Coast in Arizona, obviously. And it's almost as if we have kind of manufactured a subset of our own culture here in Arizona. And it seems to be, I think, like, again, the respect and the values are the same as the organization as a whole. But generally speaking, the culture, you have different people on the West Coast, the language is different, the community is a little different. So I think that's interesting, just from an East Coast, West Coast perspective.
Well, and you said that just right too, because in the book they talk about within organizations how there are even subcultures within that. So, you know, the IT guys with, I don't know, the doctors or whatever the case may be within the organization. So I could definitely see how there would be the divide from the East Coast and the West Coast, even though you're still part of one organizational structure. My company is different in the first thing, and it's not even really important, but it's a part of our culture, which makes us unique. We're a $3 million organization, but we're a small company still. There's only 8 of us that are employed with this company. We all live across the country, but we're based out of Houston. So whenever we get together, our team meetings are very casual. We're usually in jeans. We'll usually have a case of beer on the table. But I know in any other work setting, it would be very ironic or probably not even appropriate to be having a beer while we're having these business meetings. But because we don't get to work with each other, and because, you know, we have this distance between us so often, it's nice that we just kind of let our guards down and really hash things out in such a casual setting. So that's a lot of our culture, but it works for all of us, our personalities and things. So that's different.
I think that's a really great example too, because it's interesting how it can kind of come about like that in different ways. I always used to think of like the store that I ran was kind of had its own set of values and culture to itself. Like we were very, it's almost like it's synonymous with cohesiveness within a team. When you have like a group, like you said, of 8 to 10 individuals, when you're right at that like perfect team number, it has to create almost a subset of culture because you communicate on a whole different level. It's not, you know, a company of 110,000 baristas. It's a store of 25 baristas. So there is going to be, like you both have said, a definitely different feeling when you walk into one store versus another store. The ideal is that in every store, things are, you know, always great and always the same. And that's, I think, one of the challenges that comes with the bigger company is how do you get that culture to trickle down? Because you have to ensure that your managers and your district managers and your regional managers are all supporting your culture. And that can be a challenge too, because if you have people who don't support it, you're not just dealing with, okay, you know, we have this one store in particular that could be causing a problem, but it could be symptomatic of a bigger issue with, okay, maybe it's the district manager who has a problem, and now you're talking about 20 stores. So it's definitely just interesting how culture can vary in that company. Like you guys said, I like that a lot.
Well, to piggyback on that, which leads us right into the next question, and that is, do you believe leaders can shape the culture of an organization?
Yeah, I definitely think that's true. And, you know, like you said, I think, you know, it kind of has to come from them. You know, kind of tell me who your friends are. I'll tell you who you are. I think that kind of has always stuck with me. And, you know, tell me who your leader is, and I'll tell you, you know, what the business is how the business is going to function. And, you know, you're just going to be a representative of whoever the leader is. So I definitely think that they can affect the culture.
I agree with you. I think that they can influence the culture. I don't necessarily, depending on the organizational structure and how much these leaders are empowered, they may not be able to make certain changes or shape the culture per se. For example, I spent 6 years in the Air Force, and if I was to go back into a military setting and I said, hey, in our meetings, I think we should sit around and have beers and be in jeans today, well, the bottom line is that's not going to happen because the overall organizational structure is not set that way. And I don't have that kind of empowerment to make those decisions. So I do think to an extent.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. Like there has to be, I think when you're dealing, you know, with those bigger corporate levels or those, you know, the military level, government level, I mean, leaders do function in that role of saying, you know, this is what's acceptable, this is, or you know, this is what you can get away with, even in kind of like a counterculture aspect. And, you know, because I've worked in stores like that where it's, you know, there's no standards, there's no anything. And it's, by the way, an environment that I hate being in because it's so chaotic and very messy. But, you know, a lot of it, the standard is set by the person leading that team. And it can even be, you know, something that we did at the store that I was in charge of for a while was we created our own set of store values that were obviously 100% in line with the company values, because that would be counterproductive. But we were able to really get the team to commit to it.
I need you to be quiet, please.
And because they were, oh, you're fine. Seriously, my dogs are running around like nut jobs right now. But they were really able to commit to it because they were part of creating it. And it's like when you're part of creating that culture and your leader helps you create that culture, I think you're more dedicated to it in a way because it's part of who you are. And when you have a leader that doesn't really care about your culture, or whose culture is leading in a certain way that might be really negative, it can be really disruptional and pretty counterproductive, I would say.
Absolutely. Liz, how are we on time today?
We're at 11 minutes.
Oh, awesome, ladies. I'm so proud of our small group today.
I know. Look at us talk. It's a lot more space to fill.
It is.
But we did hit all the bullet points from this week's conversation. So unless you guys have anything that you want to add into it, I'd love to hear it. Otherwise, I think talking about organizational culture as a whole, we did really well.
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting topic. I always like reading about different organizational cultures, and I look forward to reading. It was interesting in my senior seminar class that we're taking, just as a final thought. One of our exercises for a discussion board last week was to create an ideal organization. And it was really interesting to see how consistent a lot of values are for people. Things like being treated with respect and dignity and honesty and open communication. There's a lot of universal values out there that I think are a big part of our culture and reflects kind of that American culture a lot. And so it'd be interesting to do it almost on like a country by country basis or a culture basis to see how much that impacts and changes it. I always thought would be kind of an interesting study to do. That's my final thought on everything.
There's a good one.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for being here. We'll see you guys next week.
Great. And I will post this and hopefully all will go smoothly.
Okay. Well, let me know if anything happens. I have about 40 seconds of you two chit-chatting.
Perfect. Thanks, ladies.
Have a nice evening.
Bye.
Bye-bye.